Start with Manchester United, then goes from bad to worse. So we can go to the Telegraph for Sports supplement and consider United crash out with a whimper. Ten Hag's rock bottom side cannot even find solace in Europa League. Jason, how deflating was that performance, let alone the result?
Absolutely deflating, I think, for Manchester United and their fans. I think they went into the game possibly expecting not to go through, but hoping there'd be a better performance and a win to at least sort of, show some fight. Obviously, Copenhagen have beaten Galatasaray anyway, so that was immaterial, although it also means the result tonight that Manchester United are out of Europe completely. But I think it was the nature of the performance as much as the result that's going to cause so much angst and anxiety and a real inquest into where Manchester United are heading. I think one of the issues now with them is not just the fact they're losing matches, it's the way they're losing matches. There doesn't seem to be any identity anymore to this team. No sort of pattern of play, no hope of what they're going to try and achieve going forward. Obviously, defensively, they've got their issues now with injuries as well. And I think they just have taken so many huge backward steps from last season. They've done remarkably well in some ways to be as high as they are in the Premier League, considering how badly they've played. But obviously in the Champions League, they've been a complete and utter disaster. They lost 4 of their 6 ties.
Yeah, absolutely. Finished rock bottom of the group. Riyadh, 44% of possession, just one shot on target. Did it look like there was any fight at all, any desire to upset the odds?
I think if we were going to try and put any kind of positive slant on it, I would say, and they were certainly alluding to this in commentary as well, there was perhaps more discipline than what we saw against Bournemouth. It was perhaps a little bit more controlled, and that is as far as you can go. I think the word that sort of James Duck has used in his intro there is spot on. It was they went down with a whimper. It was incredibly poor. I wouldn't say surprising, because this is what we've seen from them, not just this season, but in others. Obviously, this season we've seen this deterioration from a position of progress last year, but that really surprised me this evening, the nature of it. They're going out, they're needing a win. Obviously, the results haven't gone for them elsewhere, but they're in a position where they had something to chase. And they've got one shot on goal across the game. They've had about 40% of the possession. That's not Manchester United as we once knew it. I appreciate that we've been saying that for a number of years now. At some point, that version of United gets left in the past, and this is just the way it is. But it never sort of ceases to amaze when you watch Manchester United play quite so limply as that. I don't recall sort of anything up to Højlund sticking. I don't remember any kind of real moves that they were able to build from the front. The midfield, it sort of, it was perhaps a little bit more sturdy than we saw at the weekend. But where does Erik Ten Hag go from here with this team? We're still talking kind of 2 years into a project, not knowing what United's style of play is, who they are. I actually think going out of the Europa League as well is going to be favourable for them. It gives them that little bit of breathing room, perhaps, to make changes, to focus on the league, to recover that little bit more. But that really is quite sort of pathetic consolation, isn't it, to be talking about being out of Europe now potentially as a good thing, because that's how bad things have become.
It's also saying how bad it is by Manchester United standards, Jason, but almost all Premier League standards. This is the worst Premier League showing of any Premier League club in a group stage. 15 goals conceded in that context. One shot on target. We said the picture in the Mail there, Bruno Fernandes head bowed, and Harry Kane, who's been linked with Man United in the past, just ushering him or trying to console him slightly, it looked like in that photograph. How low are things, and who is to blame if we try and look into it? Riyadh says Ten Hag's been there a long time. People might blame the players as well, but Ten Hag's had an influence over who's come to the club now, hasn't he?
No, absolutely. There have obviously been stories of discontent in the dressing room and people talking about here we go again with a group of Manchester United players who've turned on previous managers. The only thing I'd say about that is there are an awful lot of players in that squad now who've been brought in under Erik Ten Hag. So if there is discontent in that dressing room involving those players, then obviously that's going to be an issue as well. But I think the responsibility lies across the board in terms of the ownership of the club, the executive of the club, the manager, and of course the players. I don't think there is any one part of that is wholly responsible. And certainly there is not one part of that that's not responsible. I think they've all got a part to play. I think it's been a deeper malaise. Obviously, you'd point towards the ownership. We hope that finally Sir Jim Ratcliffe's sort of 25% purchase of a stake in Manchester United will be announced next week, but we've been here every week for the last month saying that, and obviously it's well over a year now that the strategic review was announced by the Glazer family. They're going to continue being part of the ownership structure. That's going to cause problems going forward, although obviously Ratcliffe is going to hopefully get control of the sporting side of it. But, you know, he's got an awful lot of work to do. He's got to sort the whole club out. It's a massive, massive rebuild. They just have not done anything really in terms of convincing anyone in football that they are on the right path since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, and that's now 10 years ago. I mean, they've talked about cultural resets, they've talked about changing their structure, they've talked about overhauling this and overhauling that. But actually, if you look at them as a team and as a club, they're not going forward at all. And I think actually now it's almost year zero for them. I think this is as low as it can possibly go in many ways because they just look rudderless. I mean, you watch that team tonight and think, what type of football are you actually trying to play here? There was no real pattern of play. There was no real direction. The manager looks as if he's sort of helpless on the touchline. He's not getting the support he needs. I think they probably will stick with him, and rightly so. But there's big question marks over what he's doing at the club as well. And I think that's probably symptomatic of the fact that he's not getting the support around him and the leadership from the top.
How important is it that Sir Jim Ratcliffe gets in quickly, Riyadh? We're 3 weeks away from the transfer window opening. The headline, by the way, in the Star, battered, Maguire and Shaw crocked as gutless United hit rock bottom. We'll get to the injuries in a second, but with Ratcliffe, do they need to get that deal signed and ratified soon if he is going to be the Director of Football Operations going into that window?
Absolutely. It's just that they need to remove this uncertainty. They need to sort of, I suppose, purgatory might be the right word, and that's that kind of state that they're in at the moment, that sort of limbo of waiting for him to come in. But I'm also mindful about sort of presenting to Jim Ratcliffe as some kind of silver bullet, because problems at Manchester United are so deep. He's only taking 25% of the club. So his influence by its nature is going to be limited to some extent, but it has been perhaps viewed as this catch-all solution when Sir Jim Ratcliffe comes in and dilutes that Glazier influence. Maybe things will be better. That feels a lot like wishful thinking at the moment, because you can go across the board at United, and I often think that the Glazers are. They've almost become this lightning rod for every problem at the club. And as Jason's been discussing there, you've got issues with the players, you've got issues within the character of the players in the dressing room. Ten Hag, could he be doing a better job? I'm absolutely sure he could. There are decisions that he has made which cannot be put on the Glazers. You can't just turn around and say it's all about the ownership, because as appalling as they might have been as owners of that club, a lot of money has gone in. Who's made the decisions on how that money is spent? For instance, someone like Højlund, I wouldn't want to put too much on him in the Champions League. He's actually been good, but this was there was a huge amount of money spent on a very young striker who hasn't scored in the league yet. So that's just one small example of how broad these issues extend at Manchester United. So the idea that Sir Jim Ratcliffe comes in and waves a magic wand, or even puts just a little bit more money into it, that isn't going to solve problems which are woven right into the fabric of the club.
Out the headline there in the Sun, Champions League and Europa League KO, Maguire and Shaw crocked before Anfield. Will Jason Ratcliffe be forced to make a decision on Erik Ten Hag in conjunction with working out what he's going to do in the transfer window? Because if he's going to back him, then he's going to have to really stick on that, isn't he, over a sustained period of time?
Yeah, I'm sure that there's no intention, as things stand, for Jim Ratcliffe to make a quick change of manager. But obviously, as you say, the January window is opening soon. What I imagine will happen is that all sort of transfer deals that happen in that window will certainly be driven not by the manager, but will be driven by the involvement of Sir Jim Ratcliffe and whoever he brings in. Obviously, we know for a fact he's going to try and bring in a sporting director, possibly also a new head of recruitment. I think he's going to restructure that whole side of the business, really. And I imagine that part of that will be to do things much more in conjunction with Erik Ten Hag, rather than let the manager have too much say and too much of his own players coming in. And I think the Højlund deal, for example, is systematic of a type of deal they shouldn't really be doing, because as promising a player as he is, They've massively overplayed for a player who has to do an awful lot just to fulfil that potential. He really needs to be a development striker, not the main number 9 at Manchester United. And that's obviously highlighted even more tonight by the fact that Harry Kane was playing for Bayern Munich, and we know how much Manchester United wanted Harry Kane. And actually, for a long time, certainly, Harry Kane wanted Manchester United. But that deal didn't get done. Maybe Tottenham Hotspur wouldn't have sold. But my feeling with that, talking to people, I just don't think Manchester United didn't have enough work to try and sign Harry Kane, and were too easily put off by Tottenham Hotspur. I think if they'd have worked a lot harder, it's possible they could have actually done that deal, because I think Harry Kane himself was interested in it. So those are the sort of things that need to be explored quite a lot. But actually, certainly with the January window coming up, I think it'll be interesting to see how much money, if any, Manchester United spend in that window, considering the vast expenditure they've done in the last few transfer windows.
Yeah, may have to sell to buy, mightn't they? Times back page, rock bottom. United last in their group, don't even make Europa League, piling pressure on Ten Hag. And when all's looking rosy, Riyadh up next, a trip to Anfield against the league leaders who beat them 7-0 last season. How ugly could it get at the weekend on Super Sunday?
Yeah, it's at Anfield as well. It's probably not the fixture that they'd welcome. But look, this is Manchester United. We've seen this season. I think it's possibly the infuriating nature of them at the moment. They were very good against Chelsea, sort of just 3 games ago, and then the Bournemouth result happens, and then this very limp performance this evening. With United, you don't fully know what you're going to get. It's so inconsistent. Maybe something will rise out of the occasion for them, but we've seen with Liverpool, they're going very well. They're finding a way of getting results. I was at their game with Crystal Palace at the weekend. It was as hopeless a performance as Liverpool have performed for about 75 minutes, and they still managed to come out of it with a win. United are the opposite in almost every regard this season.
Yeah, what a win it would be, though. They could pull something off at Anfield. Riyadh, Jason, thank you for now.